So the next section, final section, is working through addiction and recovery. So, yeah, like the holidays can really bring up some challenges for people who are trying to manage their addiction or who might even be in early recovery around the holidays. For some people, the holidays can be a trigger, right? Depending on the dynamic of your addiction and how your addiction showed up for you. Yeah, it could be a challenging time. It could be a trigger. And that's the thing about addiction, is that sometimes the triggers are things that are going to come around every year. Your birthday, your birthday, the holidays, the 4th of July, like summertime. Sometimes these triggers are things that aren't things we can avoid, right? There are some triggers that you can avoid, like maybe if you live, near a certain intersection or a certain interstate, right? I won't travel that way, right? Or whatever it is. There are some triggers that you can avoid and others you can't. And so for those triggers that you can't avoid, it's important to try to prepare for those triggers to come up, because they come up all the time. And so sometimes, when you are in early recovery, people can isolate. People can isolate. Sometimes there's lots of fears around how to incorporate fun into the holidays, because for a large part of for the holiday season, right, fun maybe for you was using drugs and alcohol, right? So again, it's like, how do I have fun and how do I enjoy myself, especially maybe when other people are indulging, right, and I'm present, right? How do I manage that? How do I navigate that? So I think those are just some of the ideas that we wanted to kind of bring forth when we're talking a little bit about addiction and early recovery, or just recovery in general, right? Because no matter how many years you have in recovery, you are still susceptible to moments of triggers. I remember when I was first introduced to like my counseling program, I did it. My emphasis was in addictions counseling, and I was doing my internship, and this guy was talking about how like he was 20 years clean. He was clean from cocaine. He met this young girl. He was chasing her around, and she was drinking. He started drinking, and like lo and behold, he went right back to cocaine, and he thought he was good, right? And I've heard other people say this, like my dad is in recovery. He's been in recovery for like 27 years, and he's always mindful of things that can take him off of course, right? So you're never exempt, no matter how much time you have in early recovery. But the goal really is to, if the holidays can be a challenging time for you, or if you remember the holidays being filled with drugs and alcohol and just partying and just overindulging, right? You want to kind of be mindful of how you're navigating this time of year. So we just wanted to kind of bring that to the forefront.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And like you said, the triggers of the monkey is always going to be on your back, right? And when you
Mm-hmm.
become complacent, that is oftentimes where that monkey takes full advantage,
Mm-hmm.
and will get you into some stuff. And I think, like, you know, oftentimes when you are in recovery and you have a preferred drug or substance of choice, what can happen is some people can convince themselves that partaking in other things, because it's not that preferred substance
Yes.
or choice,
Mm-hmm.
that they're not an addict, right?
Susceptible. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or but it's like, you have shown that you have an addictive trait, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so one little bit is never enough for you. And what can happen is, I had a person who, when she used to drink, she would smoke cigarettes, right? And she got clean off of alcohol. She got clean. She had went to a rehab that did not allow her to smoke. And so she wasn't smoking. They had given her like the patches, and it worked
Mm-hmm.
really well for her. And then she started a job, and they had smoke break.
Mm.
And she, did well at first. And then a coworker on their smoke break offered her one. And she had been using the patch. And she said when she put the cigarette up to her lip, it automatically made her taste alcohol. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because when she would smoke, she would always drink. It was her
Yeah.
go to, it was like a combination.
Mm-hmm.
And she said she hadn't had cravings for so long from alcohol, but just putting that cigarette to her lip made her crave alcohol, and she like was craving it badly. And that's when
Mm-hmm.
she realized that she couldn't even participate in smoking anymore because the two had always been, combined. And so
Yeah.
like there are people who don't realize that, and they will say, oh, my drug of choice was pills or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
then they get around people, and alcohol is such a socially acceptable thing.
Yes.
When we are happy, we celebrate, with alcohol. When we are celebrating something, we tend to bring out alcohol, and so it's legal, right? So people think like alcohol is not bad because it's legal. But for some people, that is just the gateway towards going towards other things for
Yeah.
them. And so being mindful of that is definitely important, but also being able to, it's not where you have to tell everyone about your addiction journey or where you're at in your recovery, but be honest where you have to figure out how you can tell people, how you feel best to tell people, because it could be that, you're going out with coworkers and you guys are just going to like a coworker celebration. I mean, when I was at my old job, we used to do a holiday party in December. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that our CEO used to get us was a bottle of champagne, a
Mm.
huge bottle of champagne. And then when we went out to this event, there was, we didn't have, you had to pay for your liquor, but he would have bottomless wine. So
Mm.
you could drink wine or beer. And so again, obviously you want to be mindful, like, you wouldn't want to be sloppy drunk, but if
Right.
you were having, and there were people who be, again, celebrating, taking shots and things like that. And so I think like if you were in recovery and you hadn't shared that, you might not know how to engage in that celebration without bringing everyone's attention to, oh, I'm sober or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
like kind of figuring out what it is that you want to tell people, what you're comfortable of telling people, while
Yeah.
also keeping your sobriety safeguarded. I think is really important, because sometimes people will say, oh, I just decided not to go because I didn't want to have to tell people I was in recovery. If that works for you, that's great. But
Yeah.
if it doesn't and you want to engage and you feel like you have built up enough sober coping skills, then go
Mm-hmm.
and engage, but also make sure that you have some type of safeguards in place to keep your sobriety at the forefront. I think that
Yeah.
that's definitely key, because one sip, one slip of something can get you into serious trouble.
Yeah.
Um, so it's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, first question related to addiction and recovery. What are some important things to consider during the holidays if this time of year is a trigger to your recovery? We kind of touched on this, but anything that you would add to this question?
I would say accountability, having like an accountability partner, whether you believe in the
Mm-hmm.
12 steps program, you have a sponsor, you have sober companions, you have a provider that you're working with. If you know that you are preparing to enter into the holidays and it's a trigger for you, identifying what your triggers are, putting a name to it is very important. If you know, for instance, going home, back home, maybe you moved away and you've been sober for some time, and now you're getting ready to revisit a place that doesn't bring up the fondest memories for you. And you might run
Mm-hmm.
into someone who you used to use with or they used to sell. Coming up with a plan of how you're going to address that. So when you are hit with your triggers, what coping skills and tools you're going to utilize. Is there someone that you can call, you can phone? Is there someone who you can be honest with and vulnerable with, who is going to safeguard you? Because the other thing I think is important to acknowledge is that though some people may celebrate your sobriety and your recovery, not everyone is truly celebrating it. And some people will put you in fucked up situations where they will test you to see if you really are on that straight and narrow.
Yeah.
So it is good for you to be aware of that. Not everyone is your cheerleader. And who you decide to be around when you are feeling triggered is definitely also important. Like you have said in numerous podcasts, having a community is so important. But making sure that the people that you have in your community are someone who you can rely on, that's not going to put you in situations where they're putting, substances that you struggle with in front of you that tell you, oh, you can have one drink isn't gonna hurt you, and just putting you in really bad situations and then allowing you to partake in it, just because. I think that that's definitely important. So knowing who's in your community, making sure that they're reliable and they are going to hold you accountable. Accountability is so important. Giving name to the triggers. Don't just say like, oh, the holidays are stressful for me. What about the holidays are stressful for you? Yes. What about the holidays are triggering you? Because if you don't put a name to it, you don't acknowledge it, you can't really build a safety plan around it, right? So you have to say what exactly is your triggers so that you can put something in place to address those things. And don't just have one item on your safety plan. You need to have like a list of different things. Like we talk about that toolbox of one coping skill that you previously used in one situation may not work in that situation, right? It may not work. So you might have to apply different coping skills to see which is going to be the most effective. So I think that is going to help you. And being honest with yourself, being vulnerable is definitely something that I would say is important. But also being honest that I think the biggest takeaway for this podcast episode is don't feel obligated to put yourself in situations that are not conducive to where you want to be at or where you're currently at. No matter what you think the social norms are, what you think outsiders feel like you should be doing, not what you feel like I should be doing, but I'm just not in that place now. I think it's very important for you to be honest with yourself, but also to not feel obligated to do something that you're not prepared for. Because if you're not prepared for it, you don't have a plan in place, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be successful. And when you're struggling with something like addiction, one slip up can literally send you down the rabbit hole. And like I said, that monkey is always going to be on your back. And as soon as you're complacent one time and you let that monkey take control, you never know when they're going to give up that control. And it could literally send your world into a whirlwind. So I think it's really important for you to be honest with yourself and know when you say, I can't go into this situation, right? I can't be around these people. I can't be in this environment, people, places, and things, right? I think like that's important, and not feeling like, oh, well, I haven't seen Dom in so long, and like I know she's really looking forward to it, and like we're gonna have such a good time. But Dom wants to meet me at the local bar that I used to cop in the bathroom. And I have memories of all those different things. And so I'm really looking forward to Dom. And like, I know she wants to hang out or whatever. But damn, I remember like how that feeling felt and takes you to a whole different place. And it's like, you know what, Dom, I really want to see you. Maybe we can see each other somewhere else. Maybe we can meet up somewhere else. But I can't do it right now. It's too much of a risk. And I don't want to put myself in risky situations. So that's the only thing that I would add.
You. Yeah, and people who really love you and care about you are gonna be like, okay, like where can we meet? Like if they truly are invested in your recovery and your ability to maintain your sobriety, they're not gonna challenge that, right? That's the last thing somebody would do if they really care about you and care about you staying clean and sober. So
that point. And if they say, oh no, like you'll be good, that's not your community.
Like, no.
That's not your community. Get out of there, red flags, because when everything goes to hell again, they're going to be the first one out the door. That's not your community. Like you said, if they really support and love you and are part of that recovery journey for you, they're going to be like, okay, bet, we don't have to do that. Like whatever you need, I'm there for you. So definitely taking, listen, paying attention, I think is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Your next question is, What are some important suggestions to share with someone who's in recovery and struggling to be social?
That's a good one for some of the things I said earlier, right? That sometimes people's ability to be sober was almost synonymous with drug use, right? And so that could be challenging, right? So I would go back to something that you said, right? That it's important to have a safety plan. And that safety plan should include a list of your triggers, right? So what are your top 5 triggers? What are your top 7 triggers? What are your coping skills, right? What are some skills that you can utilize in the event that you do become triggered? Because what said earlier, what I said earlier, right, is that sometimes there are triggers that we can plan for, but sometimes there are triggers that you can't plan for, right? You go to a party, and you think you're with somebody who is like your accountability partner, but maybe your old drug dealer is there and you didn't know they was going to be there, right? Or or maybe somebody who you used to use with is there, and or maybe you see some paraphernalia on the ground, like you just don't know how you're going to be triggered. And so you want to consider, what are some of the coping skills that I have in place in the event that I do become triggered, right? You also want to have on that list supports you can call if you are struggling, right? So if in the event you are so triggered and you need to get out of there, right? Like, you need to have a list of people that you could call in the event that you need somebody to come get you. And you also want to consider, okay, is there somebody I can bring with me that can also kind of hold me accountable to, if I need to leave, if I need to get out of here, like they're like, let's go. You know what I mean? Again, this kind of goes back to what Dev was saying. Like, you want to have a community of people who are invested in your ability to stay clean and sober, if that's what you want, right? You don't want people in your circle who are not committed to helping you to do that. And to be fair, addiction is some hard shit. Like, it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. Everybody doesn't have the capacity to support someone who is in early recovery or who is in recovery in general, right? So it's no like knock against that person. It's just like, the people who you keep around you is like equivalent to taking your insulin. It's like equivalent to taking your high blood pressure medication. Like, you need to have a system in place that's going to help you stay clean and sober. The same way people who have to have a system in place to help them stay on the up and up with their high blood pressure, with their cholesterol, with their hypothyroidism, right? It's all of those things. So you want to just keep in mind, who do I have around me who's going to help me, manage this? And then you want to also consider, you want to also have on that safety plan, what happens if I relapse? What do I lose, right? Because sometimes those things will snap you right back into place real quick. Like, oh shit, I might lose my job. I might lose my wife or my husband. I might lose my partner. I might lose my job. I might lose my house. Like, you need to be reminded of what is at stake. Because I think if you forget that, it can be easy to, it can be easy to fall victim to what those triggers are, right? So having a reminder of what you can lose, right? But also on that list, you also want to consider, what am I grateful for, right? Because addiction takes you through the ringer, right? No matter what drug or substance of choice you are struggling to be in recovery from, most people that I've spoken to, clients that I've spoken to, people in my life who I know have struggled with addiction, like, it takes you through the ringer. Like, some people, and the reality is, some people do not make it on the other side. Like, some people die. Some people do not make it. Some people don't get the opportunities to, you know, make that right, to make their addiction, to make not just their addiction, like, to keep that addiction in remission, but to rebuild the relationships and to rebuild what you lost. Like, some people just don't get the opportunity to do that. So sometimes you have to also consider reminding yourself of what you're grateful for, where you have come from, and where you don't want to go back to, because those things can kind of, put a moment of fun and pleasure into perspective, right? That, maybe there are other things that I can do to have fun, whether that's taking up a hobby, whether that is, going to meetings. Meetings are not for everybody. And when I say meetings, I mean NA or AA meetings. And these are meetings that they're not, they're more like fellowship meetings. It's not therapy, right? But it's like people, who are in early recovery or who are in recovery in general. My dad still goes to like 5 to 7 meetings a week. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
part of his community at this point. And so those meetings are really for people to work the 12 steps, to talk about what's going on with them. Sometimes people have sponsors. You're supposed to have a sponsor if you are in recovery, and they can kind of help, they can also kind of help you figure out like what does your social life look like now. They can help walk you through that. So again, those would be some of the suggestions I would give to somebody who's in recovery and is really struggling with like, what does social life look like for me now that I am clean and sober, and most of my social life was, drugs and alcohol. Those would be the things that I would encourage you to consider.
I like that, being reflective of not where you were, but where you're currently at, and what is your new normal? Again,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it may be that you just can't partake in certain things that you used to do, and that's completely fine. But figuring out that and coming to terms with it, and accepting of it, I think is definitely good.
Mm-hmm. And then the last question is, what strategies are necessary when attempting to have fun and socialize? And I guess we might have touched on this somewhat in our previous responses. Is there anything you would add to this?
I think like just again, like you said, I think, trying to be reflective of what does it look like? What is my new normal?
Mm-hmm.
And finding some way to be okay with that. I
Yeah.
think and I keep saying this, but that obligation is such a heavy burden.
Yeah.
And it can really put people in situations that they knew were not good for them. They knew that was a trigger for them, and they felt obligated to do it, and then it always ends badly. So I think
Mm-hmm.
like always being reflective of, why do you feel like it's an obligation? Like, why do
Yeah.
you feel like you have to partake in something that you know is not feeding you, that you know is not good for you?
Mm-hmm.
Is it that you are putting this burden on yourself because a part of you wants to do it,
Mm-hmm.
and a part of you likes what feelings that used to come about it? Because
Yeah.
if drugs and substances didn't do something for
You
people,
wouldn't
no
do it.
one would use it, right? Like,
Right.
we're
Yeah.
not going to sit here and be like, you get nothing from using drugs or drinking or whatever.
Oh,
If
you
that
get
was the
something.
case, there would be no type of addictions, right?
Yeah.
But addiction also doesn't have to be like substance abuse. It doesn't have to be alcohol. It could be addiction to sex. It could be addiction to working out. It could be addiction to food. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if you are someone who has an eating disorder, holidays could also be triggering. Thanksgiving could be
Mm-hmm.
triggering, right?
Yeah.
If you grew up with the idea from family that you clean your plate,
Yep.
there are some cultures that you get fed food, and if you don't clean your plate, it is like you are basically insulting the person who cooked, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's definitely something to be mindful of. It could also be triggering. Sometimes you have certain cultures that they make your food for you, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
if you're not eating a good amount, they could feel like, oh, my food isn't good enough for you, or you don't like
Right.
it. So you could feel obligated to that. Or if you've known that you have struggled in the past with an eating disorder, you could feel like people are watching you and what you
Yeah.
consume. You know what I'm saying? Like, or
Mm-hmm.
if you're someone who struggled with weight, you could also feel like people are watching you, right?
Mm-hmm.
There, like with my nephew, he doesn't have an eating disorder, but one of the things that we constantly have to make him aware of is his being greedy. Like, he's the type of person, like last night I cooked, and he was like, this food is so good, and he will like inhale some food, but after he inhales it, he's like, can I get another plate? And I'm like, no, like, you can eat again, but let it
Give
set,
yourself a
like
minute, right?
settle. Because what always happens is, if I give him a second plate right after the first one, his stomach is always hurting him because his
Mm-hmm.
eyes are bigger than his stomach, and he's eating so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, there's more food left. Like, you can eat later. Like, it's okay. But,
Right.
again, if you're someone who has struggled with, feeling like maybe you grew up where food was not something that you could count on. Like
Oh yeah.
food was very, hit or miss. Like, I don't know where my next meal is coming from. Or maybe it's shopping wise, right? That could be your addiction. Maybe you grew up where you couldn't get the things that you wanted, and now you have a good job, and Black Friday is coming up, and you are going to get all the things that you want because now you're in control and you have money and can't nobody take that from you. So I think, like, being mindful and being honest with yourself and coming up with a game plan, a safety plan of how you're going to engage in these things are definitely important, because addiction doesn't always have to be taking of a substance or, alcohol. It could be, maybe you are having multiple partners and
Mhm.
you are going through something and you are engaging in risky and unhealthy behaviors. Um,
Mhm.
maybe you're addicted to stealing, and you like
Mhm.
the risk of it.
Yep.
So I think, like, just being honest with yourself and understanding, like, coming up with some type of plan and not putting yourself in situations that you're not prepared for,
Mhm.
are not good for you, but you feel obligated to participate and obligated to be there. It never ends well. It
Yeah.
never ends well.
The other thing I want to add to that too, and it just dawned on me because this is one thing that I would often talk to clients about. When you are choosing to be in early recovery, there's a grief process that goes along with that, right? That kind of, to your point, I would always talk to clients and say, like, what are you losing by joining this club of, like, sobriety, right? Because again, to say that drugs didn't give you anything is not being honest, right? And it's also not acknowledging, like, that relationship that you had with addiction, right? That
Mm-hmm.
relationship that you had with drinking or drug use, right? And so I think during this time of year, if sobriety and recovery is your choice, I also want just to acknowledge, like, there's a grief that you may be going through, right? And it may get a lot stronger and a lot more present as you are navigating and entering this time of year. So just be mindful that you might be going through some grief and loss, from all of the things that you used to do around this time, and the loss of a relationship. Drugs is it became a relationship. It became everything for a lot of people. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just want to acknowledge that could be part of some acknowledgement that you may want to give, this addiction, right? That you might be losing something. You may be feeling some grief around not being able to engage the way you used to.
Yeah, I think that's important. So, what I want to do is kind of go through the three items that we talked about and just give some brief tips. And then we can talk about just some additional supportive resources that you have created a list of. And then we can talk about how we are going to soar, these next 2 weeks. So going back to grief and loss, some of the tips that we have for managing grief and loss is going to be communicate how you're feeling to a loved one. Again, being honest, being vulnerable, being reflective with yourself. It starts with you first, and then, letting the people around you, being honest with them. I really love this, journaling your experiences. I am not great at journaling, but what I have done is created voice notes in my
Hmm.
phone.
Same.
And I really do like that. I find that to be very helpful. You can save them or you can delete them once you're done. But I always feel like that helps to bring out different emotions and feelings that I'm having. One of the things that I've done with clients in the past is the having them write their loved one a letter to kind of be reflective and get things out. Like, for instance, we talked about all the great things that have happened in my life, over the years since my mom has been gone. And if it was very weighing on me heavily and I felt like it was impacting me, I could write her a letter just to catch her up and let her know what was going on. And then,
Yeah.
however I want to dispose of that letter, that's completely fine. You can go to the grave site. If you have a grave site for your loved one, and go and talk with them and share, catch them up, doing something just to get those experiences and those feelings out of you.
Mm-hmm.
But honoring them, I think, is really important. So I do like the journaling idea. And then finding ways to honor or commemorate the person or thing that you're grieving. Like you said, taking time to remember your grandmother and knowing
Mm-hmm.
like her love language was cooking and family and the importance of that. And so taking time to honor that. And I'm pretty sure when you are having these, events where you're cooking for people that you love, you can like literally remember times with your
Mm-hmm.
grandmother, right? Like it just puts a
Mm-hmm.
smile on your face, and it's like, like, it's like a good memory. Like obviously you miss them, but it's like, I
Yeah.
remember when I did this with my grandmother, or,
Yep.
she would have did it this
Mm-hmm.
way. And now I'm like, maybe you're tweaking a recipe or something.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
I think like anytime you can, you know, remember them in some type of way, it just puts a smile on your face. And again, like there could be some sadness there. There could be,
For
different
sure.
feelings there, but you also are just like, like it just feels good
Mm-hmm.
to like remember them
Yep.
and what the impact that they had on your life, right? Like I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's always a beautiful thing.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Now, some quick tips for family dynamics. uh, Set personal boundaries, which I think everyone touched on, right? Set personal boundaries with yourself about how much family issues you will address, right? Again, it can be really easy to want to dive right in and just like kind of shoot at the hip, and you may not want to do that, right? You might want to just pace yourself and first start with personal boundaries that you're setting for yourself, right? Then you might want to explore boundaries that you're setting for your other relationships. But when you're thinking about your own relationship to self, maybe you want to start there. So that's one tip. You also want to, you want to be mindful of your expectations, right? So be realistic. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, that like, what people can give us might be small to us but major for them, and you get to decide if your expectations are realistic and if you're asking for too much. And if you are still at an impasse with this person, you get to decide how much you want to give to that relationship, right? And so again, it starts with asking yourself, is what I'm asking for realistic? Not just realistic to your wants and your needs, but realistic to the person you're asking for from those things for, right? Because again, people may not be fully equipped to give us what we want. Does that change the dynamic of the relationship? Of course it does. And if so, you get to decide, how much am I willing to give based on, and I hate to act like relationships are not transactional, but in some ways they are. And no one wants to feel like a relationship is not reciprocal, right? You want to feel like, not that you have to be giving as much as the other person and vice versa, but you don't want to feel like you're always the one giving and someone is always taking, right? You
Mm-hmm.
want to feel like the dynamic of the relationship is not one-sided, right? You don't want to feel like it's one-sided, and so that's why you need to ask yourself, is what I'm asking for realistic? And if it is, are my expectations realistic of who I'm actually asking to give me these things, right? Or to at least
Mm-hmm.
meet me halfway. And then lastly, you want to explore what acceptance looks like to you, and you want to see if you are actually applying that to your relationship, right? This kind of acceptance. And I think we get confused about what acceptance is. And I know for me, like acceptance used to get in my way, and I guess sometimes it still does to a degree. But I think what got in my way the most was, is acceptance, am I condoning what happened because I'm accepting what happened? Am I not acknowledging my experience because I'm accepting where we are? And I'd say no to both of those, right? Acceptance is merely just accepting what is in this moment, right? It doesn't mean that you agree with what happened. It doesn't mean that you condone what happens. It doesn't mean that you agree. It doesn't mean that what happened didn't affect you. All those things happened, right? And acceptance is truly, I am accepting life as it is in this moment, right? And so once you do that, there is some freedom in terms of, where you navigate in the relationship moving forward, right? So again, explore acceptance. What does it look like to you? and how are you applying acceptance to your relationship? Because again, some of those expectations that you are placing on somebody might shift once you accept that, like this person can't give me that, or this person is in this place at this time, so my expectations of them might be a bit unrealistic, right? So it helps to put things into perspective. And again, it doesn't take people off the hook, but what it does is it frees you of like the energy that you are placing on, like, I guess for me, I know that I would be stuck on acceptance because I never wanted the way I was treated to not be acknowledged. And I didn't realize that I don't need them to acknowledge what I went through. Like I don't need them to say, you're right, you did go through that. Like, no, I don't need that. I am already acknowledging that. Like, in my opinion, and my validation is more important than somebody else's. You know what I mean? Like, it's nice to get people to validate that, like, you're right, that did happen, but you're not going to always get that.
No.
You know,
No.
and do you want to hold up a relationship because you're wanting validation that you're probably not going to get? And not getting that validation has nothing to do with you either. Like, sometimes it's that person's inability to acknowledge that they harmed you, because there's shame connected to that. There is, being disappointed in themselves. There's so many things that, like, it just doesn't have anything to do with me when people are not willing to validate me. And so once I got to that perspective, that, like, this shit ain't got nothing to do with me. Like, this is their shit. You know what I mean? And so it was easier for me to say, here's where we are. Here's what I can accept. And based on what I can accept about where we are, I shouldn't be asking them for that, because they can't give it. They're not there. And am I doing more harm to myself by wanting something that they either have proven that they're not going to give me, or they're just maybe not capable? It's possible that people just aren't capable of giving us what we want. So again, those are some of the things that I would encourage people to consider as far as tips when you are navigating the dysfunction of family dynamics.
I like that. I do like that. And then for recovery, managing your recovery during the holidays, we talked about this numerous times, but develop a recovery safety plan that includes your triggers, give them names, clearly identify them, coping skills and supports that you can call if you're struggling, and things that you could lose if you relapse. We do know that relapse is a part of recovery journey, but it's really important for you to have these things in place. Again, you can't prepare for everything because life ebbs and flows, but the more you are prepared, the better you are responding, especially if you are someone who knows that you are quick to react and you don't really think things through. It's really important for you to come up with a plan that you can kind of utilize. The other thing is to be kind to yourself. Like I said, relapse is a part of the recovery journey. You got something from using the substance, although it might, it costs you a lot.
Yeah.
Depending on how long your, journey has been. You do get something out of using that substance. And so be kind to yourself, do the work, hold yourself accountable, but don't feel like if you do relapse or if you do struggle, maybe you are having a craving or whatever, don't feel like that discounts you or makes you feel like you are not great at this recovery thing or whatever. You should give up hope. It makes you feel like less than the person. I will say one of the things that I have seen in clients is they have a significant amount of recovery time and then they might relapse and they get into a black hole because of that. And I always say, remember your day one, take one day at a time, right?
Yep.
And it doesn't matter if you've had 1 day sober, if you had 2 hours sober, you just beginning it again, or you have 10 years sober. The monkey is still on your back and you're doing the work and you're fighting like hell. And it's not an easy task, depending on how long you have been in that addiction battle. Your body has now become dependent on that, right? Your brain is not firing the same way that it used to without that substance. And so it really is hard to choose sobriety.
Yeah.
It's really hard to go
That's a
through
good point,
that.
actually. Yeah.
Um, and so I always tell people, like, be kind to yourself, because choosing to go through fire at the beginning is not an easy task, especially
Mm-mm.
when why you started using it in the first place is still present. You haven't dealt with that. And
Yeah.
then all of the things that you engaged with while actively in your addiction, you have to now face all of those things sober while you are trying to slowly heal. And again, your body is going through it. It's not just your mind. It's not the easiest thing. And I think people oftentimes, when they think about addiction, it's like, oh, well, they shouldn't have put themselves in that, in that lane in the first place, or they shouldn't have put themselves in those shoes. And it's like, look,
If
they
only life was that
did,
easy.
right? They did. They're
Like,
here, but they're trying to recover. And like, we can't act like it's just like waking up and putting your pants on, because the shit is not easy. And,
it's not.
I've never been actively addicted to something, but I've had tons of loved ones who have, and I've been along them through that road of recovery. And when you are used to really minimizing or taking away your pain, and then you have to face it with nothing, no
Yeah.
type of aid at all, and you may not have the coping skills to do that just yet.
Mm-hmm.
Shit is not easy. And I think, like,
Nope.
giving people grace is always important, but giving yourself grace is definitely important. And I think also just practicing gratitude is important, and speaking from just my mom with her addiction, even when she was sober, she was always looking back on all the things that she did wrong during her active addiction. And oftentimes I felt like that really became like where she was not looking at what was happening currently. She wasn't
Yeah.
present. She was always looking back, and there was nothing she could do for the things that she had done but
Mm-hmm.
make the changes. But I feel like a lot of times, because she was always looking back, it oftentimes made it easy to fall into that relapse, because it was like
Yeah.
so overwhelming, the guilt, the shame, the frustration, the sadness. I think like it was just like so overwhelming. And it was like, when I look back and think of all the hurtful things that I've done, there's no way that I can make amends. So I think like practicing gratitude of not just reflective of where you came from, but where you're at now. Like, I was able to have a difficult conversation and not use, right? I was able to
Mm-hmm.
celebrate someone and not pick up a drink. I was able to, whatever, like small milestones, just celebrating yourself and being reflective of what you currently have in your life. And it may not be perfect, it may not be where you want to be at, but it's definitely not where you were at previously. And I think
Yes.
like that's so important, and that helps with that recovery journey of focusing on what you have gained in those small milestones, and not being so focused on all the things that you can't change, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the things that your addiction has cost you. I think that it's important to acknowledge it, but you can't sit in that, because if
Yeah.
you are, it's very easy to fall back in the woe is me, and I don't like these feelings, it's too overwhelming, so I'm just going to numb it.
Yep. Yep.
So,
Very true. Very, very true. So we also wanted to provide a list, just a list of some supportive resources if your holiday events and your interactions become too challenging, right? And so first thing is there is a new, I guess it's been out since July of 2022, if I'm not mistaken. And this is like it is a resource for people who might be struggling with emotional or mental crisis. And it's called 988. So it's similar to like calling 911, but if you call 988, you will be connected to a crisis counselor, and they can either support you nationally, or they may reroute you to like a crisis center in your area. The good thing about this too is, and if you put in like 988 into like your Google search engine, there's also a website that goes to that. You can also chat with somebody as well. You can chat, if I'm not mistaken, I think you can chat 741-741 to, I want to say crisis.
yeah,
But
crisis text
don't,
line.
yeah. So I would just encourage you all to put 988 if you have other questions, because there's actually a website and other resources for people who might be struggling with emotional or mental crisis. So go to that, your search engine, put in 988. There's a website. You can also, like I said, you can text. Sometimes texting is a little bit easier for people. But either way, it connects you to a crisis counselor who can help support you. So that's the first one we wanted to give. If you go to American Counseling Association, their website is www.counseling.org. They have lots of grief resources. So again, if you're struggling with grief, again, you can go to that website and pull up some of those resources. There's also a few apps that can help with mindfulness and meditation. We've talked about mindfulness and meditation, I think, in our last episode. We were talking about the toolbox for building resiliency. Mindfulness and meditation are great because, again, oftentimes in these situations, there is a heightened of emotion. There's to get kind of, to talk a little bit about your physiology, like there's so many stress hormones and so many stress related things that are impacting your body, right? And these things happen automatically. So when you are in a situation, maybe you're at a family, dinner for Thanksgiving, and somebody walks in the door that you don't like, or somebody walks in the door who maybe had a bad falling out with, right? Your body is automatically going into fight or flight, right? So engaging in a mindfulness practice or a meditation practice before you go, or maybe stepping into the bathroom and doing one when that person walks in the door, might help to kind of bring down some of those neurotransmitters and stress hormones that are activating in your body. It may help to kind of bring them down and begin to soothe that part of your nervous system, right? So again, you can do this before you go, right? Or you can, begin to make this more of a daily practice. One of the apps that I use is called Insight Timer. It's really good, and I love it because it is free. Now, I did purchase the membership. The membership, I think, is a yearly membership, and it's like $50. But you get access to all that they have to offer, and they have, I would say, over they probably have like 100,000 plus different ways to engage in their mindfulness and meditation practices. They have like different seminars. If you purchase the actual subscription, they have like seminars. What I like to do, and I actually haven't been doing it lately, so I do want to get back to it because I did pay for the membership, so I probably should be using it. But one thing that you can do is you can search for meditations based on a topic. So like if you're looking to meditate on acceptance, or if you're looking to meditate on parenting, if you're looking to meditate on anxiety or stress, or if you're looking to meditate to start your day, you can just put that into the search of the app and they just give you tons and tons of different meditations. And you can do ones that are like 2 minutes, that are 5 minutes. And then also you can create your own like meditation. You can create like your own meditation practice through that app. So if you don't want to use what's already there, you can create like different sounds you want to meditate to. It's really cool. So I would encourage, and you have access to all of that even if you don't pay for the membership. So again, I would use that. I love that one. Again, I love anything that's free, and anything that's free and good. Because sometimes you get shit for free and you get some shit for free and it ain't good.
They're like,
right.
You get 1 minute.
Right. You're like, God damn. Like,
right.
So that's a good resource. And then lastly, SAMHSA. SAMHSA is a government agency that really focuses on substance abuse and mental health. And it has lots of different resources on their website. If you go to www.samhsa.org, and SAMHSA is SAMHSA.org. They have lots of different recovery resources there for people who go to NA or AA, but also you can look up Celebrate Recovery meetings, and they're not as there's not as many Celebrate Recovery meetings as there are NA and AA meetings. But again, if you're not necessarily into NA or AA, and I think Celebrate Recovery is more religious based, you may want to look into that. So those are just a few resources that we wanted to provide you all as you are getting ready for the holiday season. So,
and I would say a couple more would be if you are employed or you live in a household where people are employed, your EAP is also a great resource.
Yes.
Different employers provide a benefit That covers, sometimes it covers the employee and their dependents and spouse, as well as their parents. Sometimes it
Mhm.
covers everyone that is in the household. So even if you're
Mhm.
not blood related, if you live in that household, you could be covered for a certain amount of sessions. The other great thing that your EAP benefit could cover is, like Dawn was talking about, the Insight app. Some EAPs now have partnered with other different organizations where they give their employees free access to apps. So, like the Calm app and things like that. And
Mhm.
so that's always good. And because the holiday time is a very triggering time for a lot of people, there are some therapists who do provide free or reduced counseling sessions that you're
Mhm.
able to reach out to. Sometimes therapists also have like a off duty line where you can call and text them if you're in need of an emergency. I always tell people, if you have an EAP, it's really good for you to save that number into your phone so you can just dial it automatically. Not only do you have access to the counseling benefit, but most EAPs provide in moment support. So if you are struggling, you can
Mhm.
add them as a part of your safety plan, where you can reach out and talk to someone, live, to kind of process with those things. And like Dawn was talking about with the 988, there's a crisis text line. They have that available for not just adults, but also for teens. There's a teens
Mhm.
crisis line. So that's always good. I always tell parents, the holidays can bring up different emotions for your children as well, and so having them have access to different resources could be very beneficial. Like Dawn was saying, there's grief groups, there's a bunch of different groups that's available, but also being aware of what's happening in your community. Right
Mhm.
now, I've seen flyers and we just got an email about it, but our community is actually doing a free Thanksgiving dinner in one of their schools for people
Nice.
or families who maybe couldn't afford Thanksgiving, or maybe they don't have anyone to spend Thanksgiving with or whatever. It's called a community Thanksgiving. And so they're going to provide meals for families, and you don't have to give any details. You just come in and you are served and just be around your community and built up and felt loved and supported. So like that could be something that you can participate in. Again, Friends Thanksgiving,
Mhm.
so many different things that you can engage in. And even if the holidays, maybe you don't celebrate the holidays at all, coming up with different things that you can do and not feeling obligated to participate in something that you don't feel like you want to do, I
Yeah.
think is very helpful. But these are these ideas or resources are great things to add to that toolbox.
Mhm.
So you have a number of different supports that, if you reach out to someone and they don't answer, you have someone else that you can call. Um,
Absolutely.
and so on
Mhm.
and so forth. So you're just not alone, and you don't feel like you are isolated or you are feeling unseen or unheard. I think is really important. And one of the things I really like that you brought up, Dom, was the mindfulness and grounding. If you are in a situation where you are triggered, again, maybe you were assaulted by a family member or a loved one, and they're there taking a moment, and you are back in it, right? And that can happen. Taking a moment to ground yourself and make sure you are aware of your situation. You could be a veteran and it could be triggering, having
Mhm.
loud noises, kids running around and things like that. So I think like anything you can do to help yourself have these tools that you can utilize and handle whatever may come with these upcoming holidays is really important. Like I said, with veterans, in some places during the holidays, it is tradition to shoot off a gun.
Mm.
If you have PTSD, or again, you might not even be a veteran, but you might have PTSD from some type of violence, that can be triggering.
Yeah.
Being around loved ones who are loud and then they start arguing, and maybe you are coming off of some type of experience, just trying to prepare as much as possible. Domestic violence, the holidays can bring that about, right?
Mhm.
Having the DV hotline, that's definitely a great resource. One of the great things about the domestic violence hotline website is they have a way that if you're viewing the website, you can click off of it. So it literally gets off of your screen, it gets off of your history. And that's a sense of protection, because we know
Mm-hmm.
that when people are in a domestic violence situation, or I should say interpersonal violence, thinking about leaving is one of the most dangerous times. And so
Yes.
you want to make sure that you are putting safeguards in place as much as possible to try and protect yourself as much as possible. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we covered that during the holidays, but that could also be something that is triggering, because oftentimes if you have a partner, maybe they are engaging in a substance, but not only that, a lot of jobs let people off for the holidays. So maybe that was a relief for you. And now
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be faced
Yeah.
around them a little bit more. The kids are going to be home, so that could be, irritating for
Yeah.
them. So just being mindful of all the different things, and know that there are resources available, but also putting safeguards in place, because like I said, it is one of the most dangerous times when you are starting to consider that, this is not a good situation for me to be in. I want to explore my options. Just making sure you're doing that as safely as possible so that you can get the resources and get out of there. But we want to make sure that you get out of there whole, and as safe as possible. So
Yeah.
the DV hotline is a really good resource, very empathetic people on the other line. But again, that website is a good website as well. It has tons of resources, tons of information. And your EAP can also help you with that. So I think like that's another resource.
Yeah. I was just looking up the domestic violence hotline because you mentioned that, and I thought that was really great. Some of the other pieces that you mentioned. So that number is 800-799-7233. You can also text START to 88788. So that's another resource. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because I think you brought up a couple other things that I just wasn't even thinking about, right? There's so many dynamics, the kids being home and that being a trigger to, kind of an increased potential domestic violence situation. I mean, all those dynamics are definitely things that I didn't think about. So I'm glad you brought those up for sure.
Yeah, and saving that number, one of the things that we tell people, you don't have to put it DV hotline. You can put
Mm-hmm.
pizza guy or whatever. And
Yes.
one of the things that we used to do, because we did see an increase of calls around the holidays for inter partner violence, was that we would come up with a safety plan of how they could call to make someone in their life aware that the situation was getting out of hand,
Mm-hmm.
and using code names. And so, it could be as simple as you telling your neighbor, if you hear my car alarm go off twice, call the police.
Yeah.
If I call you and I tell you I'm ready to order pizza and I tell you a specific pizza type, call the police. So using some type of codes, because sometimes it's not as simple as saying I'm being abused. That could be putting them at more risk, especially if you have kids. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so oftentimes people will try to find ways to get help without saying it. So just
Mm-hmm.
coming up with some type of plan, I think, is important. And again, being around your loved ones, if you are in a partnership that is violent, maybe you have told your mom, and now you guys are going over there for a holiday celebration, and you're on pins and needles because you don't want her to bring that up in front of your partner, because even though it's your reality, you're still in the relationship, you're not ready to leave,
Yeah.
even though she might feel like you are. And so now you're on pins and needles because you don't want her to say the wrong thing, to let your partner know that they're aware of what's going on in your household, because that could bring about trouble for you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so these are difficult things, and I think that's the part of that family dynamic that we talked about, that you can prepare as much as possible, but there are things that can come up that you can't prepare for. But I really think it's really important to have these different resources at hand and have some coping skills that you can try your best to utilize. So I'm really grateful that Dom came up with this resource list. I think that is really great. When we post our episode onto YouTube, we will post the resource list on there, as well as when we post it onto the podcast platforms. We will make sure that we post the resources on there as well, because again, we really want to help people through difficult times. And the best thing to do that is to give them resources, because some people acknowledge that they have a problem or they're dealing with something, but they're not sure how to even start that journey of addressing it. So anything that we can do, we will make sure that we post these resources. You can definitely reach out to us on our social media, on our website. We are always, willing to engage and discuss. And again, even if we're not the mental health providers for you, we can definitely make sure that we are linking you to some type of resource. We just, even if you have someone, maybe it's not your situation, you have someone that that you're concerned about, you can provide them with these resources as well. So we just want to be a resource to people during these difficult times.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very well said. All right. So now we are going to talk a little bit about how we want to soar for the next 2 weeks. So, Deveron, what about you? How are you planning to soar?
So I am planning to soar. Like I said, I have my speaking engagement, and I have been starting to formulate my speech. So I'm excited about that. I am going to soar because I am going to celebrate these individuals and making sure that I acknowledge their journey, but also I'm going to be vulnerable with my journey and share, things that I have experienced and went through, but also being a voice of empowerment and reflection of no matter what you go through, what you're able to come out looking like. So I think, just giving power to that and speaking to it is definitely something that I am looking forward to soaring with and continuing. And I'm hoping that this event leads me to other, speaking engagements and just community based support. I definitely want to be a resource. I think that is my calling. I'm definitely reflective of, I don't think that I have been through all of these life experiences and overcome them for nothing. I think that my purpose is to share my story with people, because I think that just speaking and being vulnerable gives other people that little push to be vulnerable and share their stories. And sharing of stories is how people heal and how they grow and how they can become reflective in their own life and realize that no matter what you experience, no matter what you go through, you will have a story to tell, and it will literally be someone else's motivation to inspire them. And so, like, we as a society need to get more comfortable with being vulnerable and sharing our experiences. And so that's a way that I'm looking to soar. What about you?
Yeah. Thanksgiving is coming up, so I am just excited to be working a 3-day work week and spending
Yes.
time with my family. Yeah, so I definitely just want to enjoy family. My sister actually had a pretty serious surgery in October, and me and my mom are going to be taking her out. She's going back to work the first full week of December. So we are going to take her out to eat and just, have, some fun with her and laugh with her and enjoy, enjoy some time with her before she goes back to work. So that's something else that we are planning to do. And anytime I can spend time with my people, then I'm all for that. So those are the two things I would say. I just want to enjoy these next few weeks spending time with family. Yeah. So that's how I'm planning to soar.
Oh, one other thing you're going to add to your list is you're going to kick our father-in-law's butt.
Oh.
Since I will not be there in person this holiday, I'll be
Yes.
there in December, but you will
Oh
kick his butt
yeah.
and talk junk for
Yes.
me
I will. I
on
will.
Thanksgiving,
Absolutely.
because
I will
he'll need
absolutely do
it.
that.
He'll need it. So
Yes. I
yeah.
will do that. Yeah, I will definitely do that. He's gonna love
Yeah,
that.
and make sure you let him know it was a special request from
Yes.
Devron.
I will
So
definitely let him know. So we know that we're coming up to the end of the year, and so we were talking a little bit about doing an episode on, not necessarily New Year's resolutions, but maybe intentions, right? We wanted to kind of, think about what intention do we want to create for the new year versus
Mhm.
New Year's resolutions, right? So we think we want to spend maybe one of our last episodes of the year talking a little bit about our intentions for the year. What's the word of the year for 2024 for us, and what ways are we going to, kind of manifest that in 2024. So start thinking a little bit about what your word is for 2024. What is the intention that you want to create for 2024? And we'll talk a little bit about some of the some milestones that we were able to face this year, and some goals and some ways we want to some things we want to do for 2024. So just start thinking a little bit about what your word is for 2024, and we will spend some time kind of reflecting on the year and talking about 2024.
Yes. And if you celebrate Thanksgiving, please have an amazing, safe
Yes.
Thanksgiving with whomever you decide to share the holiday with. And we will be back in 2 weeks. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. And again, if you guys need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are always able to have direct access, whether it be on our social media or our websites. But we just thank you guys for taking the time to listen in on this episode. And we hope that you took away some gems as well as some resources to apply to make your holidays a little bit less stressful.
Absolutely. You all enjoy your holiday, and we will be back in 2 weeks.
Take care.